Just a quick video about the recent revelation that most people knew, most on the left knew, the real left, that the White Helmets were really just, they were sort of basically pretending to be sort of saving people in Syria, and yet at the same time they were doubling as, they were sort of basically al-Nusra and the like, you know, these so-called quote-unquote moderate rebels that were actually killing and torturing people in Syria. So it's recently been discovered that the UN did a study and found that 40 White Helmets had actually admitted to staging chemical weapons attacks, staging them. So they were actually getting recruits and giving children candy to come and do these various things. This would be in an attempt, they said, some of them, to overthrow the Assad government. And also some of them said that they needed money, so they did this for a few dollars. So there was 40 of them, 40 White Helmets admitted that to the UN just recently in this study. And so this won't be reported in the mainstream media. Maybe it will be, but I doubt very much. And people like George Clooney, who did a whole documentary which won an Oscar, he won't be talking about that either. This doesn't help the narrative that about Assad and this ongoing effort to overthrow him. And this is not an endorsement of Assad, this video. It's just simply stating what the real left knew all along about the White Helmets, particularly people on the ground like Vanessa Beeley and Seymour Hersh and Ava Bartlett, that the White Helmets were engaging in terrorist activities. They were part of al-Nusra and so forth, a lot of them. You'd see these photos of them one time in White Helmets, and then another time they'd be with their al-Nusra and ISIS friends, you know. So this has been going on for a long time in an effort to overthrow the Syrian government, the US-backed quote-unquote moderate rebels, which are really just these pretend White Helmets that everybody celebrates all the time. So that's 40 of those, and then, of course, have we heard in the mainstream media about the 40,000 Venezuelans who have died due to crippling U.S. economic sanctions on Venezuela since 2017? You won't hear that in the mainstream media because that really goes against the narrative that the U.S. all the U.S. wants to do is help those poor Venezuelan people from that awful socialist government. So, you know, this is the thing. It's like over and over again, the US demonstrates, you know, when it carries on about humanitarian reasons for invading countries or whatever. We know that that's just a lie, that they demonstrate over and over again that they do not care about the people in these countries. Look at Yemen. The US has backed the Saudi ongoing genocide of Yemenis. One child dies every 10 minutes in Yemen. They support with $10.5 million a day with military support the apartheid's Israel. And look at what they're doing to Palestinians. That's an ongoing genocide. So there's an ongoing genocide actually now in Venezuela because there's going to be far, far more people, according to this report by Mark Weisbrot and Jeffrey Sachs. There's going to be more and more deaths due to these crippling economic sanctions. And if anybody finds anything in the mainstream media about this, great. Please leave them in the comments section, mention it in the comments section. But I'd be surprised if that's the case. Occasionally, the mainstream media tells the truth. I'm not sure why, but they occasionally do. You could call this an ongoing genocide now in Venezuela with these crippling economic sanctions. And that's why economic sanctions are an act of war. In Iran, the economic sanctions, I don't know what's happening with the Iranian people. In relation to that, I know that they're suffering. I'm not sure if it's like it is in Venezuela, but that's another act of war on Iran, economic sanctions, and trying to choke the ability for Iran to export oil. You see, Iran also is the fourth on the list of countries that have a lot of oil, and Venezuela, I think, is first on the list. So this is sort of like another Iraq where they've openly said, John Bolton has openly said that he's interested in the oil in Venezuela, and of course, because it has, you know, largest reserves of oil, apparently at this point in time, they're not even hiding that fact really. And then as far as Iran goes, they also have a lot of oil, and of course Israel, through AIPAC, dictates foreign policy to the US, and they want Iran, invaded, and they want because Israel wants basically a managed chaos situation in the Middle East. It doesn't make them look so bad because they're such an awful human rights abuser. It doesn't make them look so bad, and also, the U.S. protects Israel, so it's and their ongoing genocide of Palestinians. So everybody's silent really about that, pretty much, and that's going on too. So, it's frightening, really. I've said this before, but I have to say it again. I don't know what it will take. The only thing, to stop this sort of rogue empire from just going around and with these acts of ongoing violence towards people in other countries because they haven't submitted to U.S. empire. I don't know what it will take, for this to stop. And Trump has backed away from the INF treaty, and now apparently in Houston, Texas, there's been a whole lot of arms. They're those limited nuclear arms, which have they can cause as much damage as the large ones in many ways. They can cause lots of problems, just like the large ones. But there's been a $1.1 billion contract with the weapons industry, and that's what they've been making, these limited nukes. So, and they're for tactical purposes, they're for offensive purposes, and it's not defensive. And they're going to use them. When you have these things, that saying, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. They want to use those weapons. So, and they apparently sent a bunch off to naval vessels. So, it's kind of very frightening that they're actually, they do want to use them. I think they've even admitted that. I think I recall something where, they basically, they're itching to use these nuclear limited weapons. So anyway, it's a really sort of insane Dr. Strangelove empire at this point. It's always been leading up to this. I mean, when I look back at the history of this empire, they were doing awful, awful things in the early part of the 20th century even. And they've been doing awful things right along from the moment the Constitution was formed, the Founding Fathers. They were all problematic, the Founding Fathers, really. And it's been a problem ever since, but it's like the rot had well and truly set in by the early part of the 20th century. And Eisenhower had warned about the military-industrial complex in the 50s. And so, is it any wonder it's the insatiable monster that it is now, because it's had a long time to develop into that. And somebody said, that the U.S. citizens don't seem to either be incapable, they seem incapable of stopping this, or they don't care about it. I don't know how it is. I do know that there's a lot of people that are not interested in what the US does overseas, imperialist wars and such. They might sort of say something in surveys, but I don't see much action, like getting out in the streets and protesting war. You see like a handful of people out of 300 million people. You might see, when I say a handful, you might see a few hundred, but there's 300 million plus people in that country. So that's why there needs to be a robust anti-war movement, and it needs to be everywhere. My country is the same. There is none. There is no anti-war movement to speak of. So, but I don't know. I just don't know how this is going to end. I hope it doesn't end badly with mutually assured destruction, but it is looking very bad. The only thing that gives me hope is that there are countries allying with China and Russia. Not that I'm saying China and Russia are anything to celebrate, but at least they're not going around invading countries and committing genocides left and right, and have been, they haven't been invading countries over and over and over again and regime changing and attempting to regime change like the US has been doing, particularly since 1946. They haven't been doing that. So the greatest threat to world peace today, the greatest threat to the planet, is the US empire, and that's something we need to accept. particularly if you live in Western countries and you've always been told, like I have, like our country has, that the US is some bastion of freedom and is something to be upheld and something that's good, which we get told over. Even now, you know, our government here has endorsed that silly Juan Guaido, who's attempted a military coup with US backing in Venezuela. Our government here in Australia has backed that person. And I've posted various things on Twitter underneath Bill Shorten's Twitter posts and stuff, hoping that somebody will see it, about the 40,000 Venezuelans who have died due to crippling US sanctions. Nobody cares. Nobody says anything. Bill Shorten hasn't said anything about Venezuela, about what's happening now, what about the military coup. He won't mention that thing about 40,000 Venezuelans, even if he finds out. And he's probably going to be the next, he may be the next Prime Minister, Bill Shorten. There's an election in May in Australia. You know, it's just awful. It's awful. Belonging to a country that is such a US lackey and cares so little about countries that are being meddled with so badly by the US. It's awful belonging to having governments no matter what. And the Greens, the Australian Greens, they haven't said anything about Venezuela either. I'll probably ring them up today and find out what their position is about Venezuela, because I haven't heard any of them saying that they have a problem with the Labor Party and the coalition backing Juan Guaido. I haven't heard that. I'd like to know what their position is. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to say, so thank you so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. Please subscribe if you like the content. Please click the notifications bell, otherwise you don't receive updates. And please leave comments. I always enjoy your comments, and I thank you for them. It's always good to hear some sort of interchange or exchange about the content. Okay, so thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye for now.